Every week, millions of people move home, and as it's one of the most stressful things that you'll do in life, you need to get it right. I'm Rebecca Jane, and together with the region's best property experts, we'll be giving you some top tips and expert advice, shining a spotlight on a different area from across the Midlands, and getting to know a little more about our guests and what they look for in a home. Property is ever evolving and always a fascinating subject. We'll guide you on what you need to know and what you need to look out for here on Midlands at Home. Hello, I'm Rebecca Jane and welcome to Midlands at Home. Every week we cover a different aspect of property, whether you're moving, you're renting, renovating, relocating, you name it, we cover it. But one aspect of moving we haven't yet covered, and that is downsizing. Joining me now is a regular base here at Midlands at Home, and that's Matthew Moore from Edwards Moore, the estate agency. Matthew, welcome back.
Hello.
Always lovely to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
Now, I remember a while back, a couple of months ago now, I mentioned the word downsizing, and you soon, straight away, said, actually, we call it right-sizing.
That's the new buzzword, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's true, isn't it? Because it's finding the right property for you at that stage of life. Now, not just perhaps if you're retiring, but actually it might be that you don't need that big property. So right-sizing, I think, hitting the nail on the head.
You know, it's just getting the right size property for them, really.
That takes a while, doesn't it? Because, you know what you want. You might be used to, like you said, the big lounge or the big kitchen, but perhaps you don't need all the extra bedrooms, or perhaps you don't need that massive garden, which takes a lot of your time. So it's finding the right property. And I imagine this is something that isn't to be rushed, that can take a bit of time.
It can, and again, there's an awful lot of pressure on the right sort of properties, because you tend to find that the people who are in that situation and looking for those types of properties, there's not enough properties to go around, which can be said about the whole market at the moment, of course.
And I suppose we're looking at not just people that are coming up to retirement age. There are other people that might right-size for other reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if financially, if they need to maybe release some equity or something along those lines, all sorts of reasons really why people. I sold for a family recently, and they had a very nice large 4-bedroom detached cottage. And they reduced in size purely and simply so that they could get to a different location for schools and what have you. So although they didn't come down price-wise, they came down size-wise, but moved to a slightly more expensive location. So there's all sorts of different reasons.
I suppose that happens when you go to London. You look at what you could perhaps get in the Midlands, and then you look at the same price, and you went to somewhere like London, where you might get a far smaller property, but actually same money. So.
Well, I think there's just no comparison, to be honest with you. It's a different world down there.
Now, we are going to look at a couple of options if you're looking at right-sizing and the types of properties that might be on the market. The first one, it's a semi-detached bungalow. I think you do typically think bungalows, don't you, often with downsizing. It's in Westwick. Close. I love the neat garden. It's just a really neat property. Nothing really to do to it.
Yeah, absolutely. A super bungalow. Nice little village tunnel.
Is it? Okay.
So again, you're fairly close to everywhere, but you do feel a little bit more rural than being in the main West Midlands conurbation, of course, which is a nice thing about it. Super little cul-de-sac just outside of the village centre, and everything was done to it. So we had an awful lot of interest in that, because people just didn't have to lift a finger, of course. They could just move straight in. And a nice private but easily maintained rear garden, which again makes life easy for people when they first get in there.
It's got a drive as well.
Yep, good size drive. Yep, the previous owners had caravans and they kept their caravan on there. So again, nice thing about it was so easy to maintain. They could just hitch up the caravan and off they go for a month and not worry about it, kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't beat that little village location. Very, very popular indeed. The next one, we're now going to look at an apartment, Winchester Mews. Fantastic big lounge with this property. Apartments, again, popular for downsizing or right-sizing?
Yeah, apartments are really popular, and again, you tend to find it's when people want more of a central location, they will go for an apartment.
Right.
I have to say there's a couple of apartment blocks that we deal with on a regular basis, and I get people say to me, I don't want a flat, I just want to move into a bungalow. And I'll often say, well, look, let me take you and show you this one. No obligation, but just go and have a look and see what you think.
Yes.
And the right apartment, so many people say, oh yeah, I could live here actually. And people tend to have this idea that they are desperate to keep a garden. But actually when you see the right apartments, then people will say, well, I've got that beautiful view, we're walking distance to the village centre. So actually, yeah, I think there's enough here to let us forego things like a garden.
And I mean, you'll have a balcony with some apartments, don't you, as well?
Yeah,
so all the communal
yeah.
gardens that you haven't got to look after, they're beautiful, but you can just enjoy them and not actually have to be keeping on top of mowing your lawn every week.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And often the square footage is larger than people expect in apartments as well. They tend to think that they're small and pokey, but that's often not the case. Often they're bigger than bungalows can be.
And I think with builds now as well, people think that you're going to hear a lot of noise, maybe from above or from below, but actually that's far better as well, isn't it? Far superior with apartments
Well,
nowadays.
it is, yeah. I mean, the building regulations certainly since 2002 have changed quite dramatically, and yeah, noise is a big factor when these properties are being built.
Yeah.
So you know, again, this is something that people have in them. Oh, it's going to be noisy.
You just have it in your mind. Oh, it's going to be noisy. You're going to have, but it's not the case at all.
But it's not,
No.
and often you find those apartment blocks, the neighbours are people who are in similar circumstances, and they're not going to be having all-night parties.
Well, that's true.
You know?
Yes, that's true. Just having a cup of tea and
dancing on their laminate flooring.
Yes, exactly. Now, the third one, this is a semi-detached property. I think it's lovely looking from the outside. Portland Road. And you can see it's got a beautiful garden, immaculate garden.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was a situation where it's not the usual property for people to downsize into. I didn't necessarily expect it to be a right sizer to move in there, of course, but it's somebody who's in, again, a much larger property, a bit further out, but that's right in the village centre, so you've got beautiful views at the front over the croft, plenty of parking, nice size house, and they need to keep certain amount of accommodation because they've got family who live away, so they'll come back from time to time, of course, so they still need the 4 bedrooms, for instance. But it is proportionally, well, probably 30 or 40% smaller than the property that they're moving from.
Right.
They can release some equity. They haven't got to lift a finger when they go in there. So again, it serves a purpose in that respect.
Yeah, definitely. It's lovely. So I mean, there are lots of different choices. Now, I think whatever property you are going to right size to, it's quite an emotional experience, I imagine, for everybody.
Well, it is, because you often find that people are moving from their aspirational homes, if you like, the houses that they've built themselves up to, that they've brought their family up in, that they've got all sorts of memories. So it is a big thing to let go in that respect. I remember when I eventually managed to get my mother and father to move, and my father was, you know, well, we've always wanted this property, so why am I selling it? And I said, because it's 5 bedrooms and there's just the 2 of you in there. So
doesn't make sense.
Not at all. And you know, when they moved into the new property, and all of their stuff went with them, of course. They soon felt at home, and you know, we said I'd done it years before, and I get that comment an awful lot when people have done it. Oh, we should have done it years ago.
It's amazing how much stuff you've got. Cause my parents downsized to the country, so they've got lots of land, but a smaller property, and they had a massive clear out, and it's just the best thing they ever did. You know, they've got this lovely rural lifestyle, and my mum is always in the garden. She gets lost for hours in the garden, and you know, they've got rid of the things that they didn't need from me and my brother, and you know, new life. And
absolutely, otherwise you're just storing it, and as I say, you store it before you take it to the tip, which is pointless, really.
Well, that's it, because it's amazing how much stuff that you don't need, that you can just get rid of. And
definitely, and the only time you tend to deal with it is when you come to move, of course, when you have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's it. Lots of I think, you know, positives, and also if you think of in terms of space, if the children have left home, less housework, there's lots of positives actually.
Yeah, the bills will be reduced very often, of course.
Yeah.
So
possibly having a bit of equity in the home for some people.
Yep, council tax reduced, gas and electric bills reduced, all sorts of buildings insurance will be reduced if the size of the property's lower. So there's lots of different ways that you can reduce your living expenses by doing it, of course. But the issue is the availability of property, and what we're finding at the moment is developers don't tend to be building enough bungalows. Bungalows take up more space.
True,
so obviously the with it being a single-storey property, they tend to have quite a large footprint, so they take up more land, and land is at a premium, which is why builders aren't keen on building bungalows. And apartments have gone out of fashion to be built to a certain extent in this area as well. City centre, that's not the case, of course, but in some of the more suburban or rural areas, people aren't inclined to build apartments, whereas almost we need them good quality apartments that do serve the purpose for people who are looking at reducing their size.
Yeah, well, we just need more buildings, don't we? Need more properties.
Yeah.
And do you find bungalows is something that, you know, a lot of people are coming in asking about bungalows when they are downsizing, a very popular choice still?
Yeah, bungalows have just gone crazy, to be honest with you. I was talking to a surveyor the other day, and he was talking about a bungalow in Lichfield that he'd surveyed, and spoke to the agent who we both knew, and he said, what on earth is going on with these bungalows? He said, the prices that I'm having to, you know, the pound per square foot, if you like, that I'm having to value these at, I can't justify it. But, and he actually downvalued that property, but the people who were buying it bought it anyway at the price because they knew that somebody else would come in and buy it. So, you know, it's very much the market forces that are pushing the values of these properties up because it's supply and demand, and there's just nowhere near enough supply of bungalows.
No, no. Well, don't go anywhere, because coming up we'll be finding out about mortgage options for downsizing from independent mortgage advisor Geoffrey Potter, plus discussing the difference between leasehold and freehold. See you after the break. Welcome back. On today's show, we're discussing downsizing, and if you are considering this option but not quite sure about finance and mortgages, then this may help.
If you are downsizing in the mortgage market, what that really means is people that have moved 3 or 4 times, they're probably buying their last property, and they're downsizing from a big detached to maybe a flat or something of that nature. The best people to talk to in downsizing is, again, an independent financial advisor or a mortgage broker. There are 1 or 2 fantastic deals out there, and with the change of the legislation in April of 2014, one of the problems you've got with downsizing is age. The FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, changed the rules significantly, and mortgages have now really got to be paid off by age 65. So if you're downsizing at, say, age 55, then in the eyes of a lender, you've got to have a mortgage for 10 years. So cost is going to become a very vital issue. And there are 1 or 2 lenders out there who've introduced some really fabulous 10-year fixed rate deals. I'll put a push in for the Nationwide because they've got possibly the best deal around. It's aimed at existing customers. And indeed, we've got 2 deals in at the moment where we're moving people from one part of the country to another. This is their last move. They are downsizing. And I think we've got something like a 1.98 or a 2.3% 10-year fixed rate. Well, from their perspective, it's absolutely fantastic because they know where they are, they've got their repayments fixed, they haven't got to worry about interest rates in the future, and they know that in 10 years' time, that mortgage will be repaid. Also, on top of that, the 10-year fixed rate deals allow people to pay 10% off per annum without any penalty whatsoever.
Lots of options, and I think that's something, Matt, with there being lots of options, and it is a big thing to do, this is something certainly not to be rushed.
Yeah, definitely. Find out where you stand first and foremost, because there's all sorts of things to take into consideration. People obviously are starting to think about inheritance tax planning and things like that as well. So make sure you get the right advice. It really is critical that you do that. So financial advisors, accountants, you know, make sure that you're speaking to solicitors, make sure that you're speaking to people to ensure that you're doing the right things at the right time if you are looking at downsizing.
And it's finding the right person as well, isn't it? because we talked about that emotional attachment in the first half, and you are emotionally attached to your property, and it's a big, big thing. It's not going to be a straightforward thing because moving never is. So it's finding the right agent as well that's going to look after you.
Yeah, definitely. You need somebody who can advise you on all of these things and
be a bit compassionate.
Yes, definitely. Keep you informed of what's going on at every stage, and you know, take a personal interest, if you like, in what it is you're going through. It's not easy. At the end of the day, houses are only bricks and mortar, but it's more than that when it's somebody's home. Yeah. So, you know, make sure you pick the right person who is going to take an interest in what's going on, and whose staff, they're not necessarily just out to get the sale. They're there to get the right result.
Not just commission. Yeah. And I think you made a good point, because I remember our very first show a long time back when we mentioned about you know, finding the right agent and how they pick up the phone. Are they good on the telephone with you? Do you get a good feeling? Because you kind of go with your gut a little bit. You think, oh, actually, they're really lovely on the phone, and you know, they're very helpful. Whereas if you get that cold, frosty reception on the phone call, you might not be getting off to perhaps the best start of what you want. So, you know, you do need to be looked after.
Absolutely, and always remember that how you're dealt with on the phone is how your potential purchasers will be dealt with on the phone as well, of course. So, you know, I spend my entire life telling people how first impressions count, and it works across the board, even from the way people's phone calls are answered, of course. You know, it's getting that right impression straight away. Yeah,
and if you are looking at purchasing a property as a right size, and we're looking at leasehold and freehold, can you just briefly explain the big differences between the two? So if we start off with leasehold and what that is.
Okay, well, leasehold property, well, it sort of all merges into one to a certain extent. All freehold means is that you own the land that the property is situated on. So leasehold means that somebody else owns that land that your property that you own is on, and you will pay a ground rent for the use of that land for a period of time.
Right.
Most leases are 99 years, but you do get some leases that are 125, and all the way up to a lot which are very old church leases, properties that were built on church land and what have you, which were 999-year leases.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, there's all sorts of varieties there. Leasehold is a big issue, and you need to make sure that you're getting advice as far as that's concerned.
It's that kind of grey area that you think, oh, leasehold, what do I do with that?
It is, and I get a lot of people coming to me saying, well, I'm not going to buy that place because it's leasehold, and I will say to them, you've got to buy it as leasehold. You don't want to buy that house as a freehold.
Okay.
So, for instance, if it's a flat or an apartment, and it's freehold, and I have dealt with freehold flats and apartments, and who actually owns the land? If you've got 3 properties on top of each other and they're all freehold, who actually owns that land and whose responsibility is it? So very messy. So actually, in that instance, we had to get a lease drawn up between the owners at the time. So effectively, they issued their own leases and sorted it out from there. But if it's a flat, it has to be leasehold. You will often find as well certain retirement developments will be leasehold because obviously there's rules and regulations that they have to live by. So there's a development of bungalows where we are, which is run by a housing association, and that's restricted to over 55s, for instance. So they have to be leasehold in order to enable that housing association to enforce the rules as they are. The key as far as leases is concerned is make sure that there is more than 60 years remaining on the lease.
Oh, okay, so that's your advice, make sure that there's more than 60 years.
Yeah, the reason that we say that is because once a property goes below 60 years remaining on the lease, most mortgage lenders won't lend on it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay, so most mortgage lenders will work on 35 years over their maximum term. So 25 plus 35. So 60 years is really the cut-off figure. So your legal advisors will obviously advise you accordingly, but it is useful to know when you're out there looking.
Definitely.
When there's less than 60 years remaining, very often it is only cash buyers who can buy the property. Now, again, there's all sorts of changes in that respect with regards to valuation of leasehold extensions or purchase of freeholds. So, again, get the right advice. There's solicitors, surveyors who specialise in this and will make sure that you are paying the right amount of money for either the leasehold extension or to purchase the freehold. But there's been all sorts of legislation over the years which has changed where the values are. and ultimately the freeholder, once somebody's been an owner-occupier of that property for over 2 years, the freeholder can't refuse to either extend the lease or sell you the freehold, but it has to be at the right price.
And I think it's a good point, the right price, because you worry that if you're going to get a leasehold and there isn't much term left, then actually financially you're not making a very good choice.
Definitely.
So it's
with some flats and apartments, again, where we are, which probably 1960s built, if you like. And with those, I know that in order to extend the lease, it costs £19,000. So when you're talking a value of a property that's £80,000 or £85,000, that's a large proportion of the value of the property, of course.
Yeah. So therefore, if we go on to then freehold, which is what a lot of us will think, well, we're going to get a property, I'm definitely going to get a freehold property. Talk us through exactly what that does mean.
Well, I mean, that will be houses, obviously, houses or bungalows, where the people who are on that actually own the land. So there's no real issue. You own the building, you own the land, and that's that.
Easy.
There's all sorts of funny little connotations, common hold, flying freeholds, all sorts of nice little legal phrases that can complicate matters. A flying freehold, for instance, is when you own a terraced house, or an example is when you own a terraced house and there's an alleyway between the two houses where part of one house goes over and part of the other house goes over. And underneath that property, obviously, you own the freehold on that, or you own the freehold on your bit that goes over that alleyway, so that's called a flying freehold.
Oh, blimey,
so they're fairly commonplace and fairly straightforward, and again, you need to make sure you get the right advice from your legal advisor. But don't be scared, and don't be scared to ask. The agents should know their stuff as far as that's concerned, so feel free to ask them. Again, when we're showing people around apartments or any leasehold property, really the first thing that we should be disclosing now is the terms of the lease, so how much the service charge and ground rent is, and the length of lease that there is remaining.
So finally, for our viewers who may be looking at downsizing or right-sizing, what would your bit of advice be?
Again, just soul search to a certain extent, decide what it is that you want. But don't close your eyes to anything. Go out there and look. You know, a lot of people, as I said in the first half, a lot of people will say, I don't want to move into a flat. But actually, when they go and have a look at it, they think, oh, actually, I could live there. So keep an open mind.
Yes.
Go and have a look and get a feel for a place. A lot of the time, it's about feel. It's not about the X, Y, and Zs.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you never know. You have you know your mindset on one thing, and then you find something totally different. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here as always. I look forward to seeing you next week for more Midlands at Home. You take care.